I am Magog the giant, and I will destroy you. Ha 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 ha. Go for it.
Help, I'm in a flank 2 position. Hi, Pastor Mike here with another Watchman video broadcast. As you can tell, I have somewhat of an imagination. Always have. The problem is that sometimes I imagine things that weren't quite right. As a lot of boys growing up in America, growing up around the world, comic books captured my imagination. They infused in me things, superheroes and people with special powers and all of these things. And I was a Superman fan. I read Superman comic books anytime I got extra spending money. I bought a comic book. If I went to yard sales with my mom, I looked for comic books and I bought them. Used to have a pretty good stack of them. Finally grew up and my wife talked me into selling them in a yard sale, although I kind of wish I had them back now. And I'm just being honest. This is Mike Hoggart. I have this imagination. Wanted to be Superman. Wanted to have superpowers because all the kids were picking on me. I wanted the Charles Atlas course. You remember that? One of the X-ray glasses too. We won't talk about that. But these things I grew up on. And I've shown this before. I've got a remnant left of my comic book collection, and I'm not holding on to this for sentimental value. It's just something that has always been a reminder to me of just how dangerous this stuff is. And I'm going to be honest with you. If we were just talking about little boys reading Archie comics or something like that, I promise you I wouldn't be spending my time on the Watchman video broadcast, doing the research, doing the study. But what provoked this, and I've had people send me things. Let me dig him up out here. This is a character by the name of Magog. We will be talking about him. He got the box. The Kingdom Come. And somebody sent that to me, and I'm going, yeah, okay, I think I understand what this is. His name is Magog. That comes out of the Bible, by the way. And he is a horned superhero, like a ram or a goat. They were always sacrificed. Anyway, and he's supposed to be some superhero with some superpowers. I haven't read the comic, and I have a copy, but I probably will look at it. And then somebody sent me a book several years ago called Our Gods Wear Spandex. And some of the information that I am going to present to you came from that book. It was written by someone who was not a Christian, basically telling that all of these superheroes that are in these comic books are basically the old gods that people used to believe in a long time ago. But what really provoked me to do this particular study was the new Man of Steel movie came out. There was something about it. I was reading, if you have watched Pastor Mike online, you know that I was looking into it because everybody was making this big deal about how that the Man of Steel was like Jesus. And I'm saying, wait a minute, just got done doing a series on another Jesus. So I went to see the movie. And I was amazed at what I saw. What I was watching was about a 1.5 or 2 hour evangelical film for the coming of another Jesus. The sad thing is there are churches who jumped onto this thing who are promoting the movie, promoting the concepts that are in the movie, and they're pretending now. They're pretending that they're preaching the gospel. But it's another gospel, and I'm going to show you that. Take a look at this picture. These comic book superheroes, these monsters like Hulk. Although I'll tell you, I never was a Marvel fan. I was kind of DC because of Superman. Marvel was always just a little strange to me because of Stan Lee and others. But anyway, these superheroes, they grab our attention. They grab our imagination. They foster thoughts about what I would be like if I were Iron Man or I were the Hulk, what I would do if I had superpowers, like I could turn invisible, or I was Elastic Man and I could reach over and, grab a Coke or something like that without getting up. The problem with, and God designed us with an imagination. God designed us with part of our brain to be creative, to be artistic, to be able to draw pictures. That helps us when we're reading the scriptures, because when we're reading stories like David and Goliath and Noah's Ark, this part of our brain draws a picture for us so that we can sort of see what it is that the Bible's trying to tell us. When we're reading the Gospels, we see Jesus doing these miracles. Our imagination draws part of that picture out for us based upon what we see in the Word of God, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let me read a couple verses here that I just thought of before we started recording here. Romans chapter 1, verse 21. This is Paul describing the sinful state of mankind and what mankind does with this part of his brain. Because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations. Now, when we read the Bible and our mind starts drawing a picture, that's not vanity, because our mind is helping us picture what it is that the text of the Bible is giving us. It's when we let the imagination take over and we start dreaming up of guys in spandex that can fly around in their underwear with a cape on. Then it becomes a problem, because these people, these gods, take the place of the real God that you and I are supposed to worship. That's what he's saying here. But became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Rather than the light of Scripture going into our minds, drawing us to heaven, drawing us to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we let our mind wander all over the place, and we start inventing things. You ever invented a superhero? I have. You ever tried to place yourself inside the mind or the life of someone with special powers? I have. Lots of boys, quit saying boys, boys do it, but now we got grown-up men sitting around going to comic book conventions, dressing up like comic book characters. There's a word for it, I can't remember it. People going to Star Trek conventions, people go playing video games all day long instead of holding down a job. This is the world, the society we live in. So it's not just boys and girls that grow up with these fantasies. They carry them on into adulthood. Now, $120 million the Man of Steel movie took in the first weekend, broke all the box office records. Everybody went to see this movie. When it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray or download or whatever, millions more are going to get this idea of what this coming Messiah is supposed to be like. It is planting in them an imaginative God. Think about in the Old Testament when God forbid the Israelites from building images. He told them, he said, you've never seen me. You've never seen my face. You haven't seen what I look like. How in the world can you carve out something that you don't know if it looks like me or not? And what happened was the imagination drew in their mind what the God was going to look at, what the God was going to look like. Does the imagination have help every now and then from spiritual forces? Yeah, it does. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, the Bible talks about what we should do with these imaginations that we have, because we all have them from time to time. Everybody dreams of something, daydreaming, fantasizing, inventing things, and so on. 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, casting down imaginations. You know what they used to do back in the Old Testament? Every now and then God raised a king up. He would look at all these images and these idols and say, you know what, that's not for us. So they would cast them down. They would break them up in pieces and they would burn them. Casting down imaginations and every high thing, Superman, that exalteth itself against the knowledge, this is this side of the brain over here, the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. This is our goal as Christians, and how these preachers and these sermon writers and all these people who are taking churches to the movies and saying, now imagine this being Christ, imagine this being God, imagine this being salvation. These things are actually against the knowledge of God. Hence, they are, it's being led by another spirit. They are another Jesus bringing in another gospel. This is what we're going to be dealing with. I call it the comic con. Those of you familiar with this scene, familiar with this happening in our world today would recognize the language that I chose for this. But it is a con. A con is a fraud. It is a lie intended to be put out there so that people could believe it, so that people would be duped or deceived into something. That's what a con is. And so let me just give you some scriptures about how to avoid things like this, because I'm not kidding you, I get caught up in this stuff. I don't want to be Magog. I don't really want to be the son of Satan. But I wanted to be Superman. I wanted to be maybe Batman. Never wanted to be Robin. He always got never wanted to be Tonto either. Tonto always got beat up in town. But I wanted to be these characters. Had I not been saved, had I not had the fear of God put in me by the Word of God and my thoughts being directed by the Word of God, I would still probably be living in this little fantasy world that's created by these comic books. But now, people are being influenced by these movies, by the whole lifestyle that comes along with this. And what I'm going to show you in this presentation is the idea that the Antichrist, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience, Ephesians talks about the prince of the power of the air. There is an influencing here. There is a deception that is being planted into the imaginations and the minds of people all over this world to get ready for several things. Number one, to accept the new Jesus that's coming out. Number two, that you yourself, a mere mortal, can have these superpowers. We're going to see it out in the world. We're going to see how it's being used and planted in people's minds. We're going to see it in the church in this presentation. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, this is what Paul warned us about. Let no man deceive you by any means. For that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he is God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God, but he's actually not God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things, and now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. Now, here's something special and neat about the Bible, is that all throughout the Old Testament, us New Testament Christians, we can look through the Old Testament, we see Jesus everywhere. He was the rock that followed them in the wilderness. He was the bread that came down from heaven. He was mighty Samson who destroyed the power of his enemies. He was all, and sacrificed his life. He was all of those things. And now those things, that Jesus, is plainly revealed to us in the pages of the New Testament. So when you combine the New and the Old together, you get a beautiful and perfect picture of who the Lord Jesus was. You get a picture of his appearance. You get a picture of what he did, how he talked, what he believed, what he stood for, the miracles and the powers that he had. You get a perfect representation of that because he is revealed to us. Even though I've never seen him, he is completely and perfectly revealed to me in the pages of the Bible. But when you understand a little bit about mystery religions and how they work, you sort of get the idea that they're hiding something. They're covering something up. Something is not yet revealed. It's buried. It's occulted. It is what Albert Pike said, and Albert Pike would have loved seeing these comic books now. It's what Albert Pike called esoteric, which means secret. Exoteric means this is what we tell everybody. Esoteric is the real hidden meaning. So let's look at Superman for a minute. Let's look at the movie The Man of Steel. Let's go back to the 70s version of Superman, where you got this impression, although it was never really concrete. You could never really put your finger on it. Here Lois Lane's flying around with Superman, and it's a great scene, the flying scene from I think the 78 version of Superman. Here you have her kind of rapping this song, and she says, "Here I am holding hands with a god. I'm a fool." So there you get the first impression that she sees Superman as someone who is far above mere mortals and mortality, far above people on this earth. We find out where he comes from. But in the recent movie, The Man of Steel, you find out all kinds of stuff. In fact, they rewrote the story. I know, Superman. They rewrote the story to deliberately convey this message. Now, this is what they were telling you on the outside, the exoteric meaning. Here's Superman, he comes down from heaven, blah, blah, blah. But there is an esoteric meaning to it, a secret, hidden one. And the Bible's telling you, Paul's telling you, that at some point, the man of sin, not the man of steel, the man of sin is going to be revealed in his time, which means I don't know who he is, you don't know who he is, but at some point, he's going to appear, and I think God's people are going to go, yeah, we know who that is. We got it, because we read the Bible. We know who he is. The world is going to, because they're being implanted right now with these imaginations. The world is going to think that he is God, and they're going to worship him that way. 1 Corinthians 15:33. Now, Paul said back in 2 Thessalonians, let no man deceive you by any means. Comic books, what they used to call pulp fiction, the reason why they call them that, if you look at the paper that these old comic books were printed on, they've gotten a little bit high class now, but this was called pulp paper. It was a very, very cheap, sort of coarse, colored paper that they printed these old science fiction and these old mystery novels, and then they started printing these comic books on because, I mean, it was cheap paper. And that's why they call it pulp fiction. He said, don't let anybody deceive you by pulps, by movies, by Christian bookstores and authors and publishing companies who are trying to sell you movie tickets. Don't let anybody deceive you by these means. And then he said, 1 Corinthians 15:33, this is very interesting. Be not deceived. Here he said it again. Evil communications corrupt good manners. Now, I grew up in church. I grew up in church and bought comic books. I grew up in church and read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. Would have read Harry Potter had it been around when I was growing up. And Goosebumps, but we didn't have Goosebumps back then. But I bought at a yard sale a comic book called The Son of Satan. Now what this does, this comic book makes, well, there's the x-ray glasses. This comic book makes the son, literally the son of Satan, into a superhero. Oh, he's cool. In fact, here's what they do in this. This is why I didn't read much Marvel. Marvel takes this guy, and he is a Christian minister by day. But at night, he transforms into the seed of hell, the spawn of Satan himself. He is the son, Damon Hellstrom, who lives near Fire Lake. Okay? And he's born on February 2nd, 33rd day of the year. They turn him into a superhero, the son of Satan, who literally, instead of serving his father, the devil, he works for good. You see what it's doing? It's planting inside the image that this guy is going to be the child of the devil, and yet he's going to be a good guy. He's going to help us. I grew up in church having good manners. Evil communications wanted to corrupt those good manners. It was in comic books like this, I don't know if I can find it in here, that I first started seeing a book called The Magic Power of Witchcraft. And for like $1.50, which was kind of hard to come by back then, you could get this book and learn how to have special powers and be a witch. And I was growing up in church, and that's what I wanted to do. So parents, adults, don't think that because well, I'm a Christian, I don't go for that. We can fall. Just be careful. Be not deceived. Paul's telling us evil communications will corrupt good manners. So we're going to deal with the whole evil communications part of this. Matthew 24:4. This is in the discourse that Jesus is teaching us about what to look for in the last days. What signs should we be seeing? What things should we be noticing that's going to tell us that we are living close to the last days? He actually says like 3 times, Matthew 24:4, Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. Matthew 24:5, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Matthew 24:11, many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. Matthew 24:24, for there shall arise false Christs, false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders. insomuch that if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. If I were you, I would make sure you're on the very elect side. Because if not, you will be deceived. And I'll tell you, there are already churches pumping out massive doses of Antichrist Christianity into the churches right now. All Superman, all the Avengers, all Harry Potter is good. Gandalf the White, he's showing us the way. They're pumping in the Antichrist gospel and the Antichrist identity so that people are going to be deceived. He said, many shall come in my name saying, I am Christ. And if you watch The Man of Steel, you get it. You understand that he was presenting himself as the Savior of mankind. We're going to deal more with the details of that movie as we move along. I was just stunned at what I saw on the screen. Ephesians 4:14, that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro. Stop right here. My wife realized long time ago after we got married, Mike, grow up. We're having a yard sale. Sell the stupid comic books. Oh, they're my comic books. Mike, sell them. Okay. Mike had to grow up. Mike had to stop being a child and having all these fantasy imaginations about how this and that and the other. So God helped me, and I put away the childish things. And Paul is telling us as Christians, we need to grow up. We need to become mature Christians, not needing milk anymore, but eating meat, eating the substantive things of the Word of God that will last us and sustain us. That we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. Let me show you, I wish I had a coin here. Let me show you what the sleight of men is and cunning craftiness. Okay, this is like the only magic trick I know. Okay, it's the only one I know. What it's called is sleight of, it's right here. Okay, what it's called is sleight of hand. That's what he's getting at here. Carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men. In other words, I deliberately deceived you into thinking that I had that in my hand. There it is right there. Okay, watch very carefully. I pretend to put it in my hand. So I did it slower that time. Okay, I only know like three tricks. And cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. Lie in wait. You know, snakes and lions, they got a lot of patience. They'll lay there and they'll wait for you to come by all day long. And they're hidden. Lions, what color are lions? They're the same color as the grass they're laying in. You look down, you can't see too many snakes. You know why? They look like the ground that they're on. God designed them that way to deceive mankind. And I'm telling you, spirits, all these guys they keep talking about, they're just lying, they're just waiting for you to walk by so they can deceive you. We should not be children anymore. Ephesians 5:6, let no man deceive you with vain words, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. You know, that reminds me of, I quoted this verse. The Bible talks about wherein in time past you walked according to the course of this world. This is how I used to walk. According to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. And here he is. He's telling you in Ephesians 5:6 that the wrath of God is going to come upon the children of disobedience because they let themselves be deceived with vain words. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. Or you remember the electric company on PBS? It's a word. It's a plan. It's Letterman. I'm Letterman. I used to love that. Okay? I wanted to believe that there was going to be a superhero that was going to rise up and take care of everybody, save everybody. And I was growing up in church, hearing the gospel here, but letting the devil talk to me in this ear. Thank God that God won in my life. But so many people are turned over to these vain imaginations, and they're falling for it. Again, if I was just dealing with, 9 and 10-year-old boys that were reading comic books and chewing bubble gum, I probably wouldn't worry about it so much. But this takes over. How many of these hero movies now have been made in the last, let's say, the last 10 years? We go all the way back to Tim Burton's stylization of Batman back in the early 90s. They started catching on. And then you had all the Avengers series, Iron Man, the Hulk, Spider-Man, all of these, and there are more in the works. Wonder Woman's coming, going to talk about her, and others. They're capturing the imaginations of people, and they're being deceived by these people are being planted in the concepts of the kingdom come of the Antichrist. 2 Timothy 3:13, but evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Titus 1:10, for there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision. Do you know who invented Superman? Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster, two Jewish men who are tapping into Kabbalah mysticism and other things, and I'll show you where the idea of Superman came from, especially they of the circumcision. 2 John 1:7, for many deceivers are entered into the world who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. And so what we're seeing here is the deception that is being poured out in the last days. This is all building up to what we see in Revelation concerning the beast and the false prophet. Look at what the Bible says. The Bible says, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles. Think of superhero powers, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image. Where do you think that image is going to come from? To the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. Now I want to stop right here. We already seen that a spirit works in the children of disobedience. A spirit works in their minds and their imaginations. Guys, ladies, you ever had a fantasy? You ever had some sort of imagination that you could do this or that this was so on? Those were spirit-led. I promise you, that's what this Bible's telling you. It was spirit-led. You see that all throughout the scriptures. How did they build these images? How did the Israelites build? Why did they build a golden calf? Why did they do that? Because that's what was put into their imagination. And they did it. They were the children of disobedience. And so the false prophet, guys who make comic books and write all this other stuff, Dan Brown and all these things, the false prophets are putting into the minds of men how to build this image. That's what they're doing. Where did Nebuchadnezzar get the idea in Daniel chapter 3 to build this giant statue? He saw it in a dream. He built it. Revelation 18:23, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Sorceries, witchcraft, powers of imagination and might. Your powers are useless against me. See, that's where we get that from. It comes from this whole scenario of the false prophet deceiving everybody in the world. And you know what God said? He said this concerning Babylon and the fact that she let herself be deceived. You know what he said? The light of the candle. In other words, I'm going to take the Bible out. The voice of the bridegroom and the bride, I'm going to take the church out. You're not going to hear the real Jesus and the real church proclaiming the candle, the light of the gospel to you anymore. And I'm going to turn you over to all these fantasies and sorceries. That's what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to destroy you for it. Revelation 19:20, the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into fire lake. Okay? I'm not kidding you. That's where he's from. He is from Fire Lake, the lake of fire. He's going to be cast into the lake of fire. Why? Because he wrought miracles, and he did those things in order to deceive everybody. Now, let me introduce you to a couple of characters from the Bible. You see, when you hear all these preachers talking about Superman is Jesus, the superhero, they're not talking about the real Jesus. I'm going to tell you guess where the word hero comes from? Where do you find out about champions and all these mythological men? Where do you find out about that? But let me introduce you a couple characters out of the Bible. First one is called the Antichrist, the beast. He shows up in different ways in the Scripture. If you study typology, when you're studying the Scriptures and you see a man in the Bible, he's either going to be a picture of Christ or the Antichrist. Depends on whether he's smoking a cigarette or not, all right? Anyway, he's either going to be a picture of a good guy or a bad guy. Like Samson, he sacrifices his life in order to save his people and destroy his enemies. That's Christ. And yet we have Absalom. Absalom has long hair like a woman. You see that in Revelation 9. And he seeks to take over the throne of his father. He's the Antichrist. That's what he's a picture of. Judas was called the son of perdition. He was a thief, and yet you have the real Jesus standing there with him. And Jesus and Barabbas. You have Jesus, you have Barabbas. Barabbas is a picture of the Antichrist. Why? Because he's a thief and a murderer, and he was brought up out of prison, out of the pit, literally. So the Bible has all these characters in them, and God allows us to use the weaker side of our mind, which is our imagination, to understand these concepts and these principles. So here let's look in Revelation 17 for how God describes them both. We have the Antichrist, and we have the false church, the church of the false prophet, Mystery Babylon the Great. So he carried me away in the Spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written. 13 words here. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now I want you to focus your attention on this word mystery. Mystery. Remember, Jesus here is plainly revealed. In all of these books, he's occulted. He's esotericized. I don't know if that's a word or not. But he's made into something, a symbol or a myth or a metaphor or an allegory in order to conceal and hide his true identity. So if there is a mystery religion, then there is a queen of those mysteries who guards and protects those mysteries, and her name is Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. Now, again, just look at the concepts here. Here he's revealed. Here he's secreted or mysterious. You never know his true identity. What do these comic book characters, what do most of them have in common? They'll have a secret identity. And here, watch this. Now I'm Superman, and you don't know the difference. Now, oh, I thought you were Superman. You're just Clark Kent. Really? A pair of glasses, and that's what does it? At least Spider-Man had the knowledge to cover his whole face. Anyway, they all have a secret identity. They are hidden, occulted. They don't want anybody to know who they really are. Jesus went around telling everybody, I and my Father are one. He said it plainly. And he said, whatever I've told you disciples in your ear, you proclaim from the rooftops. You tell everybody who I am. See how it is? See how it works? So I pulled a lot of information from various sources. Albert Pike, obviously, Marilyn Ferguson, some of these other writers. But there was one guy, Manly Hall, and I talk about him a lot. And I have his book. It's a huge book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And in The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Manly Hall just goes through the whole of Earth mythology from every corner of the earth. And he basically says they're all talking about the same secret, the same mystery. It's the mystery of life. It's the mystery of mankind, how he's going to turn out. The fact he's going to be, there's a great, great, great big secret that so far they've not let just mortal men in on. And this is what he talks about in The Secret Teachings of All Ages. So he's explaining the concepts behind what is Mystery Babylon and what she's trying to conceal. So he says in the preface to his book, The Secret Teachings, the book to which this is the introduction is dedicated to the proposition that concealed within the emblematic, think of Superman, think of Batman, all the emblems they have, emblematic figures, allegories, and rituals of the ancients is a secret doctrine. Blavatsky wrote a book called The Secret Doctrine concerning the inner mysteries of life, which doctrine has been preserved in toto, or in other words, in its totality, among a small band of initiated minds since the beginning of the world. During departing, these illumined philosophers left their formula that others too might attain to understanding. But lest these secret processes fall into uncultured hands and be perverted, the great arcanum was concealed in symbol or allegory, and those who can today discover its lost keys may open with them a treasure house of philosophic, scientific, and religious truth. And the reason why I'm pausing, I'm just reading this again, and I'm thinking in my mind what he's talking about here. First of all, he talks about something that's concealed in emblematic figures, allegories, or rituals, and so on. That's what comic books are all about. They're concealing something, an allegory. They are, in many cases, American mythology. You see, we come to America, and the Greeks had their myths, the Romans had their myths, the Chinese had their myths, and everything like that. But America, being a new nation, we didn't have all of those. So we invented new ones. But what we find out is that they're not really new, because Solomon said there is no new thing under the sun. They're just reimaginations of old mythologies. And Manly Hall's saying they conceal a secret. He talked about the inner mysteries of life, man becoming God. And then he talks about the Illuminati. Now, some people use that word to describe any politician they don't like. He's in the Illuminati. I know he is. Spraying chemicals on everybody. There really is an Illuminati. Manly Hall said that there is an elite few that have always been around since the beginning of the world that have known in toto the complete comprehension of what it is they're doing. They've not been illuminated by God. They've been illuminated by the angel of light, Lucifer, the light bearer. Light angels, literally what that means. And so as these men would die off, they left the formula, this idea, to others, but they shrouded it in mystery and secret. And I mean, you're never going to read a Superman comic book or go to see Superman, the Man of Steel, and Superman comes out and says, "Hi, I'm the Antichrist. I'm going to take over the world and send you all to hell." He's never going to do that. What they're going to do is they're going to deceive everybody in symbols and allegory, and it's to be kept hidden. He called it the Great Arcanum, the grand, huge, big secret of everything. And this is what Mystery Babylon conceals, and it will be revealed in its time. Now, something I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you some artwork. I discovered this in doing the research for Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. Dan Brown sort of opened a doorway to people's imagination, the idea that Jesus had a wife and they had children and there's an offspring and this and that and the other. This is all part of building up the deception, because how many people read the book, the Da Vinci Code? How many people watched the movie? I mean, this thing is covering the entire earth, and everybody is grabbing onto these concepts. It's almost like they're trying to chase down and overrun the scriptures to capture the minds of not just Americans, but people all over the planet. I started seeing this idea. I started researching Mary Magdalene, and I noticed that often painters who would depict Mary Magdalene would often feature her in the same way. Take a look at this first graphic here. This is Mary Magdalene. She's holding a skull, and she has a book. I'll tell you what that is. Okay, the skull, and we've talked about this before, the skull is the Antichrist. He's the dead God, or the dying God, who has nothing left but a skull. Now, Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code tried to portray that Mary Magdalene was actually lamenting her dead husband, Jesus Christ, who never rose from the grave. That's not true. This is not Mary Magdalene. She did not get impregnated by Jesus. But here is Mystery Babylon, Isis. She is mourning the loss of her husband, Osiris, hence the skull. And notice that she has her elbow covering a book. She's concealing a secret. I want you to think of books. 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 Of the writing of books, there are many. All right? Think of, here, let's do this one here. This one. See this symbol? Thor. We'll talk about it. All right? Anyway, they're concealed inside of a book. Here's another one. We have Mary Magdalene, the book, and the skull. They're telling you there's something hidden that's going to be revealed, and the symbolism of that is a book. Think of what David said in Psalm 139, in thy book, talking about God's book, all my members were written, which in continuance of fashion when as yet there was none of them. Masons have the idea of what's called the lost word, a secret book that's hidden and will be revealed one of these days that will bring man to immortality. I believe this book is a symbol for DNA, the book where the Antichrist is hidden. Here's another one. Mary Magdalene, the urn that you see down there represents the dead ashes of her husband. And here she is with a book. Here's another one. Mary Magdalene holding a skull, her elbow on a book. Here's one here. This one it stunned me. When I first read this in the Da Vinci Code, I just went like this. Here is Mystery Babylon. I want you to notice her belly. She's pregnant. She's going to have a baby. Who is that going to be? If this is Isis and her dead husband Osiris impregnated her, then she's going to have Horus, the hawk god. We'll talk about him. And notice that there's a candle here and there's a book. And she's contemplating that book, the secret. That's where the secret is. It's in the book. The reason why this one fascinated me so much is that Dan Brown brought attention to the fact that we have another picture of the sacred feminine, or Isis, the little mermaid, who, while she's singing her song about wanting to be human, she draws attention to this very painting, Mystery Babylon, or Isis, mourning the loss of her dead husband. She is she is a travailing woman with child, and she's guarding the secret that lies inside the book. Do you see the concept now? Do you see where all of this is going? And so they publish and print these things, and people read them, and oh, wow, then they make the movies. That's the real imagination there. I didn't read the book. I just went to see the movie. And so this is feeding into the imaginations of people, and this is how her spirit is working. Now, all of these gods and all of these superheroes and things like that, as I mentioned before, America didn't have her own myths. So we invented Superman and Batman and Wolverine and the Hulk and Spider-Man and all these superheroes that have come out. These are essentially revamped or repackaged or redrawn mythologies, is essentially what they are. And so what these gods are, what these superheroes are gods. That's what Lois Lane said in the 70s version of Superman. Here I am like a kid out of school holding hands with a god. I'm a fool. I think there's a lot in that statement. And think about Superman. He flies. He's a god that flies. He's invulnerable. You can't kill him. He comes from a planet called Krypton. Where do you find out what that word means? We'll talk about it. Here's what God says in a warning to us about the mythology that's now creeping in to even the church. Exodus 20 verse 3, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Exodus 23:13, and in all things that I've said unto you be circumspect. That means look around you. Make no mention of the name of other gods, neither let it be heard out of thy mouth. And there's a lot to this that is linked with Albert Pike and Freemasonry. Freemasonry has a secret name for God that nobody knows. It's hidden, it's occulted, and we're only going to whisper it to you, and you can't tell anybody what it is. It's Jah-Bul-On. And God said they should not make no mention of the name of other gods. Now you're saying, oh, Mike, you said it. Well, okay, I got to teach it to you. But I believe that he's referring to naming other gods as far as worship or incantations or anything like that. God said, don't do it. Absolutely don't do it. And we see Old Testament prophets talking, using the term Baal and things like that. So just using the name is not bad. But invoking the name or reverencing the name of other gods, that's what it is. God's name, he said, you should not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. God has his name up here. Don't take it. By the way, he has his word higher than his name. And so anyway, don't use the name of other gods. Don't call your God Kal-El. We'll find out what that means. Exodus 23:24, thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works. Do after their works. But thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their what? Images. Probably, in retrospect, I shouldn't have sold the comic books. I should have burned them. Because they're images of false gods. That's what they are. Nor do after their works. Yeah, I wanted to fly. Oh, yeah, I wanted to fly. Still do. Don't do after their works. You see what I think is coming? We all know, we've studied this long enough. Transhumanism is going to turn men into superheroes. You wait and see, because it is coming, and it's coming pretty fast. And God said, don't do after their works. Don't want those. Don't want what they're here to offer you. And here's what happens. Remember what Paul said. He said that evil communications will corrupt good manners. And I was sitting here reading this stuff, and I was getting corrupted. It was corrupting what preachers were trying to preach into me. Sunday school teachers were trying to teach me. And by the way, Damon Hellstrom, that's his name in here, he's got a big pentagram on his chest. That should have said something. But anyway, what happens is that these gods will turn men's hearts away from the real God to follow after these other gods. Exodus 32:1. And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, they gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. That sort of sounds like what Peter was telling us. He says, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, everything continues on the way it goes. And here's what's happening. People are not going to wait for God to come and fix earth's problems. They're going to jump the gun and say, we're going to do it ourselves with new gods. And what's happened is that while people should be waiting for the coming of the Lord, because that's what Jesus told us to do, wait for the promise of his coming. They're not waiting. They're going to go ahead and create their own gods and be turned away from the real God. Deuteronomy 12:30, take heed to thyself that thou be not snared by following them. After that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. So this is my point here, and it's biblical, that what has happened in America, and America is really the leader of all this, and we start sending this stuff all over the world, is America came over here, the Pilgrims came over here with a King James Bible and a stack of comic books, right? No. They came back, they came over to this land with first originally a Geneva Bible, then the King James. That's what was the first Bible printed in America, was a King James Bible, and it was actually issued by Congress, if I remember my history. I may not be totally right on that. But Congress actually set aside money so that the Bible could be printed. That was our government back then. But what's happened? We've replaced this God with the old gods of mythology. We just gave them new suits to wear, new costumes, new powers, new names and things like that. And that's what's happening. God said, you left all that stuff over there in Europe and in Greece and in Rome. You left all that stuff over there. You should have left it there. Don't go asking, how did these nations serve their gods? I'm going to do the same thing. We're doing it in America right now. Deuteronomy 13:13, certain men, the children of Belial. Stop right here. That's who that is. The son of Belial, Satan himself, are gone out from among you and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods which ye have not known. See the number 13 there and the number 13 there? Look at that. 13:13. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, abominations of the earth. The children of Belial took the inhabitants of God's city, took them out, and said, let's go serve other ones. Let's read comic books. Let's go watch superhero movies about gods that are to come save mankind. Let's look at the evil force that's going to come down and invade. Let's look at Loki, who's going to invade and bring all these minions with him and rule over planet Earth. We need a Hulk. We need a Hulk to save mankind. Let us serve other gods. That's what we're dealing with here. The Bible nails it. Deuteronomy 32:17. They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers feared not. Look at this. This Bible is alive. It's telling us what's going on right now. He's telling you that these gods, these gods, are actually devils. That's what they are. That's what it says. They sacrificed unto devils, to gods, to new gods that came newly up. Superman hadn't been around, what? When he came out in the 30s, 40s? New gods that newly came up. And I promise you, and you say, well, that's yours. I promise you, there's going to come a guy who's going to be superhero man. He's going to do superpowers, signs and wonders. He's going to deceive everybody. And the world is going to follow this new God. That's what this book says. I promise you it's going to happen. And so we find out, and we're just kind of looking at these mythological stories that actually they have a basis in reality in the scriptures. The Bible refers to them as gods. They're not to be worshipped, and you throw down their images. And they're actually devils, bad guys, evil angels. We're going to see that verse in a little bit. So think of people in the Bible that had like extraordinary powers. Now we know that God gave Samson strength. That came from God. There were others in the scriptures that could do extraordinary things, miracles, wonders, superpowers. Matthew 8:28, when he was come to the other side of the country of the Gergesenes, there met him two possessed with devils, gods, coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass that way. These were not just fierce. They exceeded what fierce really is. And the reason why no man might pass that way, because they would get beat up or killed by these guys, and nobody could subdue them. And we have what some people say is a mistake in the Bible. Actually, it's not. Two different places. This was the Gergesenes, and we have two possessed with devils living in the tombs. In Mark chapter 5, we have the Gadarenes. There came over unto the other side of the sea into the country of the Gadarenes, and when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. That's a devil, a god, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. I saw that in The Man of Steel. They actually had him handcuffed. He let them do it. And then when it came time to go into action, he just went, and they were plucked asunder. That scene, this scene was in that movie. Okay? But look at what this man, because he had many devils in him, he had superhero strength. No man could bind him. It's interesting that with Superman, only Krypton and the presence of Krypton can make him weak. I'll talk about that if you know what Krypton is, okay? And by the way, there's different kinds of Krypton. There's green kryptonite, which weakens Superman. There is red kryptonite. There's gold kryptonite. There's different colors of it, and some of them can actually kill him. Some of them make him insane. See, I kind of know my stuff on this, all right? But here we have a superhero. We have a Superman. He's so full of devils that when they bind him with iron chains, he just goes like that. He has superhuman strength. Where did it come from? Not God. It came from devils. Look at what his name is. Mark chapter 5, verse 9, when he asked him, what is thy name? He answered and saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. Take a look at this. This is a scene out of a Superman comic book. This is the legion of superheroes. Many men. Oh, you have Elastic Lad and Ultra Boy and Light Lass and Phantom Girl and Sun Boy and Supergirl and Star Boy and all these Lightning Lad. You have, and they're all doing the Heil Hitler thing. Okay, you have all these legions of superheroes because sometimes one superhero is not enough. You need a whole force of them. So here we have the legion of superheroes. You have the Justice League. You have the Avengers. All legions of gods or mortals with gods in them working miracles and saving the planet. They got it right from the Bible. God knows what's going on. Here we have another story. Someone devil-possessed with superhuman strength. Acts 9:13. Then certain of the vagabond Jews, exorcists, took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits in the name of the Lord Jesus, saying, We adjure you by Jesus whom Paul preacheth. And there were 7 sons of one Sceva, a Jew and chief of the priests, which did so. And the evil spirit answered and said, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are ye? And the man in whom the evil spirit was leaped on them and overcame them and prevailed against them, so that they fled out of the house naked and wounded. One man against 7 men. It's like Jackie Chan, Chuck Norris, Jack Bauer, you name it, okay? One man against 7 men. And the one man had so much superhuman strength that he beat up and ripped the clothes off of these other 7 guys. He had the powers of the God in him. He was a superhero. That's who he was. Then, let's look at other powers that they have. In Exodus chapter 7, you remember this story? God told Moses, take your rod and cast it down. It kind of looks like a serpent. And it would become a serpent. And that's what Moses did. And he picked it up by the tail and became. So Moses goes, and he's going to do this by the power of God before Pharaoh. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, now the magicians of Egypt. They also did in like manner with their enchantments. For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents, but Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. Now it shows you that the rod, Christ, has more power than the rod of the devil. But notice that through the power of devils and gods, the magicians and sorcerers of Pharaoh had superhuman abilities to transform something like a rod into a serpent. They really did this. It wasn't a joke. This is not just some story. It didn't make it look like snakes. They didn't whittle snakes. They had power to turn this lifeless stick into a serpent, a snake. Superhuman powers given by the gods. Now, I'm going to transfer all of that concept, and I want you to think about this, to something that is prophetic. And I believe all these stories are prophetic in their nature. In other words, they're revealing end times events. Here's one, a direct prophecy about the coming of the gods, the superheroes, the mighty men who are invulnerable. Joel chapter 2, Joel's army. They shall run like mighty men. Think of the Flash. They shall climb the wall like men of war. And they shall march everyone on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks. Neither shall, and stop right here. That was the whole theme of like the Avengers movie, was that Loki was trying to break them all up, and they decided to stick together. We have a Hulk. Remember, we're gonna defeat you. They shall not break their ranks, neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk everyone in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. They shall, think of Superman being shot with, but the neat scene in Superman Returns where the bullet is going slowly into his eye, and it hits his eye, and it just, I mean, that was a cool scene, right? They shall fall upon the sword, and they shall not be wounded. They shall run to and fro in the city, and they shall run upon the wall, and they shall climb up upon the houses, and they shall enter in at the windows like a thief. The earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. This is at the advent of the Lord's coming. There's going to be, look at this. There's going to be a superhero army. You see it here in, this is DC, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Batman, The Flash, unless you're using an iPad, then you have no Flash. And some of these others, I don't know who these are. And then you have the Marvel superheroes, the Hulk and Captain America. And now I will say this. There was only one scene out of all of these superhero movies that I like. And it was in the Avengers. When Captain America, they were talking about these gods coming down. Captain America says, there's only one God. High five! High five on that one. Woo-hoo! That was the only thing that I like out of these movies. That's right. There is only one God. But here you have all these superheroes that are mighty men. And they can't be hurt. They can't be harmed. And they can climb walls and leap over tall buildings with a single. Are you getting this? This is Joel's army. This is Joel's army. It's an army of supermen. You've heard me talk about this. The concept of Joel's army is deeply embedded in the church. And what happens? You have Joel's army, Generation Extreme. Notice the X here, X-Men. You know what that is? Chromosome. It's an X chromosome. That's what all these X-Men and X-Streams and everything like that, Generation X, that's what this is. It's about chromosomes. And here's Todd Bentley, the guy with superhuman strength and kicks old women in the stomach so they can rid them of demons. This is Todd Bentley, who's he had tattooed on his neck Joel's Army dog tags. He is leading the charge into what these people are telling everybody inside these churches, that there is going to come a Superman army that is going to destroy all the powers of evil and hand over the kingdom to God. You see, watch this now. Just like in the days of Moses, when the Israelites were at the base of Mount Sinai and they got tired of waiting for God to come down and reign over them, they decided they were going to do it themselves by making gods to worship. It's the same thing with dominion theology, thinking, well, we're getting kind of tired of waiting for God to come back. We're just going to take over the world for Him. And that's what the whole Joel's Army concept is all about. Here is a quote from one of these who is teaching the Joel's Army superhero myth, Clifford Hill. He said, the new breed is an elite group of believers endowed with supernatural power that would enable them to be part of the army of dread warriors that God was said to be raising up in our generation. This is scary. Because what they're telling all these Christians, all these people, these sheeple, is that God's going to hit them with something. Like, you remember Ultraman? Oh, I loved Ultraman. He had this thing that came out of a UFO, and he would raise it up to the sky, and he would be transformed into this. This was cool. I used to love this show. He was transformed now into a giant god who got his power from the sun. Could do that. This is what they're telling everybody that's going to happen. God's going to send down something, and He's going to change them. He's going to turn them into a new breed. You know what that is? They got their DNA changed. They're going to have supernatural powers. They're going to be warriors. You know what? Really, they're telling you that the Christians are going to be what's in Joel chapter 2. We've already seen, there's a video we did called The Truth Behind Joel's Army, that this army that Joel is describing is not the super warrior Christians. It's these devils that rise up out of the pit in Revelation chapter 9. It's the exact description of them, word for word. They're telling you that we are going to become gods one of these days and take over the world. They're right. It is going to happen. Here is one of the grandfathers of this movement, a guy by the name of Bob Jones. You're going to hear him in this video clip talk about how this is going to make you people into a Superman race. Take a listen.
supermen and women. This earth is not their home. They're just going to be passing through. These breakthroughs are going to put them in a level like you had never seen before. God is going to have him a superman race. He's going to have him dread champions.
Superman race. I mean, and here's where they get it from. They get it from the idea of Superman. He is, I noticed this one, the evolution of the man of tomorrow. You see what it's planting in people's minds. You see what's being planted in all these church people's minds. The idea that something's going to happen, something's going to alter us, something's going to transform us. We're going to get bit by a radioactive spider, or lightning's going to shoot down from heaven, or something like that is going to transform men into these supermen species, a new breed of gods is going to be born on this planet. We talked about what the false prophet is going to do. He's going to deceive everybody. Revelation 13:14 is going to deceive them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles. Revelation 16:14, they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of the Almighty God. You see, the Joel's army has one purpose in mind. That is to enable and empower all of the human beings to become superhero gods for one reason. It's to fight a battle. What battle is it? It's the battle of Armageddon. In Revelation chapter 19, they're actually fighting Jesus and all of those who come with him at his coming. That's what they're setting everybody up for. Revelation 19:20, the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, and with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast. There it is right there. Look at Revelation 13:1, the description of the beast. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshiped the beast, saying, watch this now, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? You know, in the Man of Steel, that's what they tried. The army, the United States Army, not knowing who he really was, they tried to make war with him. They couldn't. They couldn't defeat him. So finally, the general said, he's all right. He's on our side. He's a good guy. They're going to realize that they can't defeat this beast because of his superhero abilities. Now, we explained this, and I quoted this a while ago, but the idea is that these gods, these mythological beings, Apollo and Dionysus, and we're going to talk about some of them, are really evil angels. See, I told you they could fly. Psalm 78 verse 49, he cast upon them the fierceness of his anger, wrath and indignation and trouble by sending evil angels among them. This is part of the setup of God's wrath upon the earth, that he is sending evil angels amongst mankind to bring him to the battle of Armageddon. It's what's going on. How did God send them among us? How did God do that? Isaiah 14:12, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I'll fly up there, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. This number one evil angel, that's who he is, that's who Lucifer is. This number one evil angel was cast down out of heaven. He falls from heaven. Think about, I think I've seen this in a movie somewhere. Iron Man in the Avengers fell from heaven. Revelation 12:7. Here's the rest of the evil angels. This is where they come from. There was war in heaven. Think about it. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And so we're seeing from the Bible that these angels were cast out into the earth. Now they've got vengeance on their mind. Now they think they're going to defeat God. How can we do this? Well, we need help. So let's convert all of the human beings into demigods, half gods, half humans. You say, well, that's just fancy. You've been reading too much comic books, Pastor Mike. No. I've been reading the scriptures, because there was a group of angels that actually tried it, making human gods, half human, half gods. Jude chapter 1, verse 6 says, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, they left Krypton, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, under the judgment of the great day. He's talking about a group of angels referred to as the sons of God that came to the earth, fell to the earth, left their habitation, left their estate, fell to the earth, mated with human women, and created gods. Think about Superman 1, the 70s version. He's in love with Lois Lane. We all know that. Superman 2, they did it. Superman 5, Superman Returns, the remake. Superman's got a kid, and he's got superpowers. Half human, half God. It exists. City of Angels. This is fantasy movie. City of Angels. Seth, an angel, falls so he can mate with Meg Ryan. Nicolas Cage, Meg Ryan. Genesis chapter 6, verse 1. It came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all which they chose. And then verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. Here, watch this now. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. So here's what the Bible's telling you. And I'm going to pause it right here, and we're going to pick this up next week, and we're going to talk about these men of renown. The men of renown, all the mythologies of gods like Apollo, Dionysus, Mithras, Hercules, Jason and the Argonauts, and all these things, these men of renown were the mythologies of old. These were the gods. In some cases, they were pure gods, devils, evil angels, that's what the Bible calls them, or they were hybrids of gods and human women. And the Bible's telling you, you've heard the old stories, you've heard the mythologies, the Bible's telling you where they came from. There was a movie, actually they was from a comic book called Starman. I don't know which came first, the movie or the comic book. But Starman was an extraterrestrial spirit-like being that took on the form of a human male. He mated with this woman, and he told her before he leaves, you've got my baby, and your child is going to be a great teacher on the earth. It was a setup for the Antichrist, people. All these mythologies, the Bible's telling you what they are and what their source is. So next time you think of Superman, understand who he really is. Batman, the Dark Knight. He had a transformation up here, a metamorphosis, as it were. All of these superheroes, most of them start out as a puny human that turns into a god. We're being set up in this world, and the Bible is telling you how it's going to turn out and where they come from. So next week, we're going to start looking at some of these mythologies. Guys like Gilgamesh and Goliath, Hercules, Atlas, Wonder Woman. We're going to start looking at some of these and how they relate to the mythologies of old, what the Bible says about them, and the advent and the coming, the revealing of the Antichrist. Hope you've enjoyed it so far. We're going to get into it next week. Be watching for the next Watchman video broadcast. This is Pastor Mike. I love you. I appreciate you. I want you to know the truth. I want maybe somebody who is just really into these comic books. Maybe a child, maybe a teenager, maybe a grown man who just fantasizes all the time about being one of these gods. Maybe you can understand from a guy like me who knows what that feels like. You can understand from me that it's a setup. My real desire now is to be like God, to be like Jesus Christ. That's what the word Christian means. I want to be like Jesus, who incidentally walked on water, walked through walls, flies up in the air, he comes riding on a white horse. See, I want to be with him. I want to be like him. Okay? It's Pastor Mike. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.